Most people don't realize that emotional affairs don't begin with intention. They begin with relief. Relief from loneliness, from feeling unseen, from conversations that no longer feel safe at home. And that is exactly why emotional affairs are so hard to end. Psychology explains this pattern clearly. Emotional affairs attach themselves not to desire alone, but to unmet emotional needs. They grow quietly, often under the radar of guilt, because nothing physical has happened yet. At least that is what the mind keeps saying. By the end of this discussion, you will understand why emotional affairs feel so powerful, why logic alone rarely ends them, and why walking away can feel more painful than staying. Most importantly, you will understand what is really happening inside the brain when someone says, "I can't let this go." An emotional affair often starts in a place that feels innocent. A coworker listens, a friend understands, a message arrives at the right moment. The brain notices something important. Someone is meeting an emotional need with ease, consistency, and no pressure. The human brain is wired to seek connection. When emotional validation appears regularly, the brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is not about pleasure alone, it is about anticipation. It teaches the brain to look forward to the next interaction. Over time, this anticipation becomes attachment. The brain starts associating emotional safety with one specific person. That bond does not require physical contact, it requires emotional availability. This is where emotional affairs become difficult to end. The bond feels real because neurologically it is real. The brain does not distinguish between emotional closeness and physical closeness when it comes to attachment. Have you ever noticed how a simple message can change your mood instantly? That is not coincidence, that is conditioning. Another powerful factor is secrecy. When a connection is hidden, the brain assigns it extra value. Secrecy creates intensity. It makes ordinary conversations feel special and charged. Psychology refers to this as the forbidden effect. When something feels off limits, it gains emotional weight. The brain begins to protect it even when the person knows it is harmful. This is why emotional affairs often feel deeper than expected. The secrecy fuels fantasy. The brain fills in gaps with idealized versions of the other person. In real life, relationships include stress, conflict, and responsibility. Emotional affairs often exist in a bubble where those pressures are absent. The brain compares the two unfairly. Here is a surprising insight. Emotional affairs are rarely about the other person. They are about how the person feels when they are with them. The brain becomes attached to a version of the self that feels more alive, more understood, more valued. Ending the affair feels like losing that version of oneself. This creates internal conflict. Part of the mind knows the situation is wrong or unsustainable. Another part fears emotional withdrawal. That fear is powerful. When emotional attachment forms, the brain activates the same systems involved in loss and separation. That is why ending emotional affairs can feel like grief. Have you ever wondered why some people return to emotional affairs even after deciding to stop? It's not weakness, it's withdrawal. The brain experiences emotional withdrawal similarly to addiction. The absence of messages, conversations, and emotional reinforcement triggers discomfort, anxiety, and longing. This discomfort pushes people back into contact, often with rationalizations. "We are just friends. It doesn't mean anything. I can handle this." These justifications are not lies, they are coping mechanisms. The brain is trying to reduce emotional pain. Another reason emotional affairs are hard to end is emotional comparison. Once someone experiences emotional attunement elsewhere, they begin to notice its absence at home. The brain highlights what is missing rather than what exists. This creates dissatisfaction that may not have been conscious before. This doesn't mean the primary relationship is broken beyond repair. It means unmet needs have become visible. Here is a reflective question. Are emotional affairs difficult to end because of love or because they temporarily numb emotional discomfort? Often, it's the second. Emotional affairs also provide escape. They offer a space where one is not defined by roles or expectations. There is no pressure to be a partner, a parent, or a provider. The brain values escape when stress is high. Ending the affair means facing emotional reality again. Another psychological layer is identity. Over time, emotional affairs become part of daily routine. Morning messages, late-night conversations, emotional check-ins. When those patterns disappear, the brain experiences disorientation. The day feels incomplete. That sense of emptiness can be misinterpreted as love, when it is actually attachment loss. Emotional affairs also thrive on ambiguity. Because boundaries are unclear, the brain avoids closure. There is always a what if. Closure requires clarity. Ambiguity keeps the emotional loop alive. This is why half measures rarely work. Reducing contact without emotional clarity often prolongs attachment. Have you noticed how clarity, even painful clarity, can feel relieving? The brain prefers certainty over prolonged emotional tension. Ending an emotional affair requires more than stopping communication. It requires understanding why the attachment formed. Without addressing the underlying emotional needs, the brain will seek replacement elsewhere. This does not mean blame, it means awareness. Another surprising insight is that emotional affairs can feel safer than physical ones. Emotional closeness feels controllable, less risky, and easier to justify. This false sense of safety makes people underestimate the emotional damage involved. Over time, emotional investment shifts. Emotional energy that once went into the primary relationship is redirected. The brain follows emotional reward. It always does. Ending the affair means redirecting emotional investment back into oneself or into healthier connections. That redirection feels uncomfortable at first. Growth often does. Here's another reflective moment. If emotional affairs are so hard to end, what does that say about the emotional hunger beneath them? That question matters more than judgment. Emotional affairs are not ended by guilt alone. Guilt fades, attachment remains. They are ended by insight, boundaries, and emotional courage. Courage to tolerate emotional discomfort without escaping it. Courage to face unmet needs honestly. Courage to choose long-term stability over short-term relief. When someone finally ends an emotional affair fully, something interesting happens. The brain recalibrates. Emotional sensitivity returns. Perspective shifts. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. This process takes time. Emotional bonds do not dissolve overnight, but they do weaken when no longer reinforced. Ending an emotional affair is not about punishment. It's about reclaiming emotional agency. It's about deciding where emotional energy belongs. If you are navigating this experience, reflection is essential, not judgment, not denial. Understanding the psychology behind emotional attachment gives you power over it. The core truth is simple. Emotional affairs are hard to end because they meet real emotional needs in an unreal environment. They feel good because they remove friction. But growth happens in reality, not escape. When emotional awareness replaces secrecy, clarity replaces confusion. And clarity, even when painful, creates freedom. If this perspective resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what emotional connection truly means in your life. You are invited to share your thoughts, engage with others, and continue exploring the psychology behind relationships and emotional behavior. Awareness is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning.